In this video, I'm going to be talking about mind control and how the thoughts that you think, your belief systems and your opinions are very often shaped by society, culture, parents, blah, 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 and also the actions and therefore behavior that you participate in are probably not your own of your own free will. I'm going to be sharing a few subtle kinds of mind control, how you know you're under mind control in some way. A bit of a spoiler, everybody is, or vast majority of people are in some sense, and how you can break free from it pretty easily, to be fair. So I'm going to cover those things in this video. For a bit of context, what we need to understand here is that the study of the human mind is a very complex study. That the study of psychology goes on, and the more that we think that we know, the more that we realize and understand that we can't know everything. It's like a never-ending search, and very often when we give up the need for that knowledge and that information, we become a lot more at peace. But that isn't to say that there isn't forms of mind control, whether that is like nefariously happening or whether it's just human nature that's taking place. Now I'm more of a believer that it's simply human nature that's going on, and survival of the fittest instincts within people. There's nature falls into natural hierarchies, right? And human beings are no different. So the people at the top of these hierarchies, once again, not to say that this is one big conspiracy, that isn't what this is about whatsoever, but people in certain positions in society do have agendas that they want to remain in power. And if you were in that same situation, you've got to question, would you be doing that same thing? Because it's easy to sit here and say, no, I wouldn't, but the reality is you probably would act and behave differently if you were in the different situations. If you were, let's say, running a country, for example, you would be more liable for corruption than you are right now, because you have more power, you have, there's more of the naive human behavior that is more susceptible to corruption when you're in those positions. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there's people sitting around a table dictating what's going on in the world. That isn't what I'm suggesting here. But what I am suggesting is that human nature has and always will be operating at the level of society, culture and the individual. And that is where I perceive mind control to be, is the mass collective hysteria, particularly what we're seeing at the moment. Is that orchestrated? In my opinion, there's a strong possibility that is the case. I can't confirm it, can't deny it, but there is a strong possibility that a lot of that is orchestrated. And this is what's led me to create this video on mind control, because if you ask yourself the question now, why do you think as you think right now? How do you, or why do you behave as you behave? The limitations that you've put onto yourself, why can't you break through them? Are you conditioned to not break through them? Are you conditioned? Have you been, manipulated in some way, whether nefariously or not nefariously, to not push after the best version of what you perceive yourself to be? And the mind is an incredibly fluid and malleable tool. If you don't have the whereabouts and the knowledge to be able to block out some of these more subtle means of mind control, then you are simply operating like a robot. You are like a machine, a wheel in a cog. Now I call this, I call the exiting of that conditioning the natural man. And you might call that like if you go more biologically, it might be the more genomic self, the ancestral lineage, and you are living out that ancestral lineage as the pinnacle of that, like the pinnacle of evolution of that DNA strand, if you like. But with conditioning, with all this crap that's put onto us from society and culture and our parents, as I've said before, There is no natural man. There is no instinctual genomic self there to express itself. If you've watched my previous videos, I am not a believer in free will. I don't think it can be proven. I don't think it exists. I merely think nature is happening and operating through the individual, and the conditioning and everything on top that's put on top of that is merely nature happening again. There is no separation to that. But you listening to this video and me giving this video is just happening, right? There's no will to create that, in my opinion. I can't prove it, but based on things that have happened to me and physiological things that's happened to me, that is how the world has shown itself to be. So let's talk about some more subtle forms of mind control that go on. Okay, so you've got repetition. You'll notice in the media at the moment, they use a lot of these buzzwords that are going on, right? Like build back better. That's one with the World Economic Forum. I did a video on that. And you'll see just little slogans everywhere. You'll see symbols everywhere. You know, the triangle with the eye in, and a lot of the conspiracy people are all over that. That's everywhere. It has, symbolic meaning. And as people see these things, especially if it's subliminal, they keep seeing it. It's like imprinted, like a pattern that's imprinted on their mind, right? So you can watch these videos on YouTube. I'll put a link in one below where they call it a magician or something, a mind control expert can basically plant in what he wants you to draw on a piece of paper, and all of the audience, more or less all of the audience, have drawn that thing. Right, that is a more humorous form of mind control in that scenario. Number 2, subliminal imagery. There are many videos you can find on YouTube or other, video platforms to show flashing images that come on between programs, and images that may be placed in films, adverts and stuff on television, where they might, implant something to purchase. So they might put like a Coca-Cola can, for example, on a child's cartoon, Disney cartoon or something. And things like that are just planting things into our psyche because we haven't got the barriers up. Particularly if we're watching television, we're very often in like a sleepy state. And our barriers are down, our rational barriers are down, and things can be planted in, our patterns can be planted in. And it's pretty dangerous as well, because subliminal stuff, in games in particular, they're very brutal, and young men in particular, they play out their human urges by shooting other people in these games, right? And very often they go out into the world and start killing people. I say very often, that's probably incorrect, but it's certainly known that basically mass psychopaths have gone out and killed loads of people, and when they're being questioned by the police, what they've said is that a lot of that influence came from the games that they were playing before. Now that is a lot of subliminal stuff that's going on in these games and elsewhere, which is essentially program their mind to do things that rationally they'd never do, particularly if they had a decent upbringing or something, right? Number 3, symbolism. Symbols play a huge role in the lives of a human being, right? So the words that I'm talking to you now produce symbols in the mind, and those symbols are what is making sense of the world. So if I say to you apple, the image of an apple, whether you know it or not, that's how it's making sense of the word itself, right? So if I said the moon, for example, you think of the moon, and that is how we structure reality in our own mind, is by using symbols, which is why symbol literacy, if you get into like the conspiracy theories and stuff, if you learn how to read symbols, you can start putting together pieces of a puzzle that a lot of other people don't know what's going on. So the old famous eye in the triangle, the eye in the pyramid and stuff on the dollar notes and things like that. You start seeing ancient history, and the symbols back then are very similar to symbols now, and you start seeing, okay, so the people who are actually maybe at the higher echelons of society here are the ones still pulling the strings, as there were 2,500-3,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, and that's something to be aware of, because the symbols are everywhere in all the movies, even in the written word, in books and everything. Symbols are there to be read, and they can be implemented into the malleable mind of a person. Number 4, playing on man's animalistic natures. Now this is, in my opinion, what's gone on for the last 16, 17, 18 months is that mass fear has been infiltrated into the average mind, who cannot rationally make sense of what's going on in the world, who isn't at peace with life and with reality. The people who are at that level of awareness can be completely manipulated into doing things they either don't want to do or makes completely no sense whatsoever through their, let's call it, lower animalistic natures: fear, greed, instant gratification, sex. I mean, sex is just like food, and sex sells. Since the 1970s, 1980s, you could put women with big boobs and blonde hair and whatever on the front of magazines and stuff, and things just sell. They could market everything. You go today on social media and Instagram in particular, and if you put a woman with a big backside and a nice pair of underwear on and whatever, they could sell anything, and all the men would just buy whatever they're selling. Like huge industries, right? And that's because that plays on the lower human natures. You see this in marketing everywhere, and the mass fear that the pandemic has caused at the moment means a lot of people's barriers have come down, and they're looking for that grandfather figure, the father figure, in order to say, please protect me, please protect me. That's what I think is going on at the moment in a lot of what's going on in the world. And number 5, the emotional state, because when we move people into an emotional state, that can be happiness, sadness, maybe this bleeds back into fear as well. You can control what's going on in their life, and people grab onto it. So I know when I was in the personal development industry, we were taught to make people overly excited and then sell to them, because when you're in that overly excited state, you can manipulate what is being sold. Yes, the personal industry is an incredibly manipulative industry. I did write an article called Why the Personal Development Industry is a Sham. Go and read that. Okay, so that's the 5 subtle forms of mind control that I've just made notes on here. And the next section I want to talk about is, how do you know if you're under mind control? What I like to lay up front is that more or less everybody is under some subtle form of mind control. Okay, so probably have that pre-context before I continue talking. Okay, so just 3 here on how you'll know you're under mind control. Number 1, if you participate in any self-abusive behavior of any sort, anything that harms the self. Okay, now that could be smoking, drinking, sex again, the negative form of sex, like Tinder and all these stupid apps. There's no human connection there. It's just meaningless sex with people, right? Things like that. Anything that's self-abusive. Caffeine, that's another one. If you're participating in that, you are actively anti-life. You are lowering the human's potential and the human's genomic self. Okay, now that isn't, if you smoke and drink, I'm not saying stop it straight away. Probably not a good idea to just go cold turkey and everything anyway, to be honest, but just know that if you are operating with self-abusive behavior patterns, you probably are under some form of mind control. You are being manipulated to act in that way, and now there's a pattern that's being created that society calls an addiction that you now have to try and overcome or break through. That isn't as difficult as what society once again makes out to be, though. As easy as it's been implanted, it can be took out. Number 2, crowd psychology. If you catch yourself participating in groupthink, then it's time to step back and see what behavior patterns you're acting out, which you wouldn't do if you hadn't been influenced by the group. Now, the biggest offenders, if you like, of groupthink is society in general, which is merely a group of ideas that have been put together and agreed upon by a society that, has got it to where it is. However, nature doesn't stop evolving. It's going to continue trying to make the best or the highest form of nature that it can. At the moment, it's the human being. But if you are participating in groupthink, you can no longer ascend past the crowd. You're probably, if you watch my last video on self-sabotage, you're probably fearful of becoming better than the crowd. Not falling below the crowd, you fear going above them. And now with cancel culture and everything that's going on in the world, or perceived cancel culture, because that in itself is a crowd group thing. With that going on, people are fearful of saying things, right? Well, the natural man, as I mentioned earlier, the man that is in alignment with his own authenticity, does not care about being cancelled. He won't be cancelled. He will be what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragile. The more the people throw mud at him, the more powerful he will become if he's aligned himself true with authenticity. Number 3. You get hooked on other people's manipulation easily. You find yourself being manipulated by the crowd or by individuals quite easily. You end up saying yes to everything rather than having decent boundaries. That's very often from childhood. Parents haven't set good boundaries, and therefore when people manipulate you later on in life, you're easily influenced by them, generally speaking, for the negative. So an example of this might be when you go to the bar and your friends are all getting pissed up and you're on water, for example, and they're saying, oh, come and have a drink, and then you end up having a drink. Yeah, so that's an example of being manipulated easily by other people's manipulation. And now the most important part here is how to break free from the patterns of mind control, whether that's come from the television, the media, social media, your friends, your family, culture, society, blah, blah, completely irrelevant. In my opinion, the very first thing that you need to do is to get physically healthy, because a physically healthy human being becomes a threat to society and a threat to culture. It becomes a threat because it is there to ascend past the crowd. It's there to ascend past what the group thinks is right and wrong. You can think clearly, you can remove all the toxins and the rubbish that you're putting into your body and stop that automatically. That will put you streets ahead of 99% of the population, okay? If you study the work of Wilhelm Reich, I do suggest picking up his work. A lot of his stuff got burnt and everything, which generally speaking says that it's probably worth reading. Essentially, he says that the body and the mind are one. They're not linked. They are one thing. And we know this from, if we get nervous, our guts might, butterflies is the same. And we get nervous. That's not because we are nervous that our gut goes that way. It's not because our gut has butterflies that we get nervous. It's because they are the same thing. They are, there are as many neurons in the gut, apparently, as there are in the brain. Now, one of the biggest issues with psychology that I have, the field of psychology, is that people separate the mind and the body. The mind and the body are not separate. They are intertwined. They are the same thing. And so when we get physically healthy, our mental state naturally gets that way as well. It has to. It is the same thing. So get yourself to the gym or start an exercise program or something if you're not already. Get off all the self-destructive behaviors, the alcohol, smoking, caffeine, all that stuff. And also on this point, I think it's important to recognize here that the skin, it's a bit of an added bonus that I talk to my clients about. The skin is the interface between the body and life. So what you tend to find is that people with a lot of tattoos are in quite a lot of pain, not physical pain, but mental pain, because that is how they sort of show that they're in the pain, is by inking up everywhere. Now that isn't to say everybody, of course. You go back to the ancient tribes, which is more a tribalistic thing to show people what tribe they're in. But that is a big field of study about the skin being the interface between reality, life, and the internal state. So if people have bad skin, People get tattooed, obviously, but if people have bad skin in general, very often that's a sign of mental health problems, which I've got a big issue with that comment, but we'll leave that one there. Okay, so get physically healthy is essentially where I'm at. And secondly, just start attuning yourself back with nature a little bit. You don't need to, go hiking every day or whatever else. Learn to silence your life just for an hour a day. If you don't do it already, if you're manic all the time, just separate yourself from that. Go into nature. If you don't meditate already, I'm not a huge proponent of people doing hours and hours of meditation, but just do a little bit to start separating yourself from the constant noise that's going on, because that noise is generally just a ball of society's noise that has just been plonked in there. They're not yours. It's not your ideas. It's not your thoughts, and therefore it's not your behaviors acting off of them. So if you just meditate and separate yourself from that noise, that then puts you on the path of, in my opinion, freedom. That is freedom. That is liberation, or the beginning of freedom and the beginning of liberation. When you separate yourself, you become objective. You become the observer of your thoughts rather than the thoughts themselves. There are stages, it's not really stages, but there are stages far past that objective state. But that is a great place to just start and separate yourself from the thoughts and the opinions of others and all the behavior, all the right and wrong and all that stuff that's been just planted in there. You are nature's highest expression. Spend some time back with nature and with, let's call it, the mother, if you like to call that as the earth, because she does give the wisdom that you need to operate in such an insane society. If you don't realize at the moment that society is completely insane, then you're probably insane. So that's it for this video. Please check out my Patreon account, which I have recently set up and added a lot of content to. I do appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my podcast. I will see you in the next video.